Let's jump right in. Picture this. You're running a thriving digital business. Your clients are handing over their most sensitive data, right? But then a massive enterprise prospect comes along and asks, hey, how do we know our data is actually safe with you? Well, you can't exactly just look them in the eye and say, just trust us. I mean, in today's digital landscape, a handshake just doesn't cut it. You need proof. Verifiable, standardized, universally recognized proof. And that is exactly where SOC 2 comes in. Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're going to decode the fundamentals behind SOC 2. Think of it as the ultimate currency of verifiable digital trust.
So what exactly is SOC 2? Honestly, if you're a founder or an IT manager, just hearing that acronym might literally make you break out in a cold sweat. It's got this reputation, you know? It often feels like this massive penalty or just an endless grueling chore of compliance paperwork. But we really need to reframe that today. Actually, scratch that. We have to reframe it. SOC 2 isn't a punishment. It is a structural blueprint for building and, more importantly, communicating organizational trust. It's a highly detailed report that essentially lifts the hood on your company's internal operations and proves to the outside world that your digital fortress is actually secure.
To really grasp its true purpose, let's look at this direct quote from the AICPA. They're the organization that actually created this standard. They say a SOC 2 report exists to provide reasonable assurance that the service organization's service commitments and system requirements were achieved. I absolutely love this phrasing. Notice what it doesn't say. It's not about absolute perfection, because let's be real, absolute perfection does not exist in cybersecurity. It's about reasonable assurance. The fundamental goal here is simply proving that your organization actually does what it promises to do. You say you encrypt data, prove it. You say you delete data when a customer leaves, prove it.
Okay, here's the roadmap for today's Explainer. We're going to deconstruct this framework into 5 easily digestible pieces: the currency of digital trust, defining the system boundaries, the trust services criteria, inside the control environment, and finally, the auditor's final verdict. Let's get into it.
Starting right off with Section 1, the currency of digital trust.
To make all this compliance jargon feel a bit more real, we're going to use a case study throughout this explainer. Meet the illustrative ABC service organization. ABC is a cloud-based software company, and they're processing billions, yes, billions, of customer requests every single year. They handle invoicing, secure payment processing, and consumer engagement all via an API. And this brilliantly illustrates the real-world stakes we're dealing with. When you're processing billions of financial transactions and personal data points, which, by the way, sounds incredibly stressful to manage, your customers aren't just going to take your word for it that your systems are locked down. ABC needs a SOC 2 report just to do business. It's literally their ticket to playing in the big leagues.
Moving right along to Section 2, defining the system boundaries. So before an independent auditor can even think about testing your system, you have to draw the walls of your digital fortress. SOC 2 breaks the system down into 5 core components. We're talking infrastructure, software, people, procedures, and data. For our example, ABC, their infrastructure includes a subservice called XYZ Cloud Hosting. Their software, that covers their custom apps, their logging systems, antivirus tools, all that. Data covers the transaction streams and the files they process. Now, it is absolutely vital to understand this next part. Anything outside this specific boundary is deliberately excluded from the audit. If a system doesn't directly support the services you're providing to your customers, it is not in the report, period.
You know, when we think of digital trust, we usually just picture rows of servers and lines of code. But SOC 2 grounds all these abstract concepts in everyday human roles. Take a look at this breakdown for ABC. Executive management sets the goals. Engineering deploys the code. InfoSec manages the controls. And human resources? Well, they are just as crucial as the engineers. HR handles background checks, onboarding, and the termination process. Think about it. A vulnerability in HR's termination process is a vulnerability in the entire digital system. If a fired employee still has system access, that's a massive problem, right?
All right, that brings us to Section 3, the trust services criteria.
Okay, so we've defined the boundaries, but how is that system actually judged? Like, what are the rules of the game here? Well, the AICPA provides 5 possible measuring sticks, which they call the trust services criteria. For ABC's specific report, they're being evaluated on 3 of them: security, availability, and confidentiality. Security ensures the system is protected against unauthorized access or damage. Availability ensures the system is actually up, running, and ready for use when promised. And confidentiality ensures the designated, sensitive information is fiercely protected. These criteria right here, they're the exact measuring sticks ABC has to measure up to.
Which leads us to Section 4, inside the control environment. This is where we dive into the real evidence. These are the everyday controls, policies, and procedures ABC relies on to meet those strict criteria we just talked about. And ABC executes some highly rigorous procedures. For example, they don't just treat all data the same way. No, they have strict data classification, categorizing everything as restricted, private, or public, which dictates exactly how it must be handled. They've got logical and physical access management, meaning you don't just log into the system without a documented request, manager approval, and multi-factor authentication. Plus, they have meticulously documented incident response plans for when things inevitably go wrong, and change management protocols so that no developer can just push rogue code to the live server on a Friday afternoon.
Let's just take a quick visual breather here. Managing these internal controls across an entire company is incredibly complex. It is not just a simple checklist. It's an entire ecosystem of overlapping layers. You have automated intrusion detection systems working right alongside human-driven quarterly access reviews, and all of that is supported by annual employee security training. Every single layer supports the next, creating a really resilient defense in depth. It's like a giant puzzle where every piece is critical.
Now, a totally crucial point here is that security isn't achieved in isolation. It is a shared responsibility model, and that's brilliantly illustrated by two concepts: CUECs and CSOCs. Complementary User Entity Controls, or CUECs, are things that you, the customer, have to do. ABC might lock the digital building, but if you write your admin password on a sticky note and leave it at a coffee shop, well, that's on you. You have to protect your own keys. On the flip side, complementary subservice organization controls, or CSOCs, are what ABC's vendors must do. Remember XYZ cloud hosting from earlier? ABC relies entirely on XYZ's physical data center security, stuff like cameras and biometric locks, to protect the actual physical servers.
And this leads us to the climax of the explainer. Section 5, the auditor's final verdict.
So we know what ABC says they do, but in the world of SOC 2, talk is pretty cheap. The promises made by the organization must now be put to the ultimate independent test. A SOC 2 report fundamentally resolves a sort of he said, she said dynamic through structure. Section 1 of the report is management's assertion. This is ABC's leadership firmly stating, hey, we designed the system correctly and our controls operated effectively all year. But immediately following that is Section 2, the independent service auditor's report. This is an external, totally objective third party declaring, we examined and tested their system and yes, they are telling the truth.
Now, the auditor doesn't just take a quick glance around and call it a day. They follow a super rigorous methodology. Step 1, they obtain a deep, fundamental understanding of the system's design. Step 2, they assess the risks that certain controls might fail. Step 3, they test the suitability of the design, basically asking, on paper, do these rules actually make sense? And finally, the most critical part, Step 4, they test the operating effectiveness of those controls over a period of time. Usually that's an entire year, from January 1st to December 31st. They want undeniable proof that you followed your own rules every single day.
So, let's see how all this builds into the actual report card found in Section 4 of a SOC 2 document. This is exactly what clients and prospects care about the most. Take a look at Control ABC1. Employees must read and accept the security policy upon hire. To verify this, the auditor doesn't just casually ask HR. They physically inspect a sample of new hires' documentation. And the result here? No exceptions noted. This means the control worked perfectly. If an employee hadn't signed that policy, the auditor would note an exception, and everyone reading the report would see it. That level of transparency, that is the absolute heartbeat of SOC 2.
By systematically breaking down the system boundaries, the criteria, the controls, and that rigorous audit process, you can really start to see why SOC 2 is the gold standard for digital trust. It transforms vague promises into verified reality. But as we wrap up, I want to leave you with a somewhat provocative thought, especially when you think about ABC's highly interconnected architecture. Your internal system might be perfectly secure, but what about your vendors? The true chain of digital trust is only as strong as its absolute weakest link. So consider your own supply chain vulnerabilities today. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and remember to keep asking the tough questions about your data.